The silence of the streets. Hey, if you love dark, twisted true crime, smash that subscribe button, hit like, and comment below, because what you're about to hear will keep you up at night. The town of Ashwood was quiet, too quiet. On the surface, it looked like any other small town in the Midwest. Tree-lined streets, white picket fences, kids riding bikes in the late afternoon, neighbors waving as they mowed their lawns. But beneath the neatly trimmed hedges and glowing porch lights, a darkness lingered that no one could see, until the night of October 12th. It started with a scream. It was faint, almost swallowed by the hum of streetlights and the occasional passing car. Detective Marissa Holden, a veteran with over 15 years on the force, had learned early in her career that screams in small towns never came without reason. By the time she arrived at 9:42 p.m., the first responders were already there, surrounding a house on Maple Avenue, a quiet cul-de-sac lined with maple trees that had just begun to shed their leaves for autumn. Inside, the scene was chilling. The living room was bathed in the flickering orange of a single overturned lamp. Furniture lay overturned as if a struggle had taken place. But it wasn't the chaos that froze Marissa's blood, it was the body. A young man, barely 23, sprawled across the carpet, eyes wide open, staring at something unseen. The police cordoned off the area quickly, but even through the yellow tape, the sense of unease was palpable. The entire town seemed to hold its breath. Marissa crouched beside the victim, taking in the details: shallow bruising along his forearms, a smear of blood on the floor, and a notebook that had been ripped from his hands. On its pages, cryptic notes were scribbled. "He watches. Boys, trust no one." The words were jagged, hurried, and unsettling. Marissa's gut tightened. This wasn't just a crime of passion. This was meticulous, calculated. Meanwhile, the neighbors whispered among themselves, offering fragmented stories. A late-night visitor seen leaving the house. Strange headlights in the driveway days before. The victim had recently returned to Ashwood after a long absence, and nobody really knew why. But everyone knew one thing: someone in this town was hiding something, and that someone might still be walking among them. The next morning, Marissa and her partner, Detective Lucas Rivera, sat in the dimly lit precinct, reviewing the case. They had a name: Daniel Carter. A young man with a quiet demeanor, a bookstore job, and a few close friends who swore he was too good to be true. But the notebook suggested Daniel had uncovered something dangerous, something that someone didn't want him to reveal. By the end of that first day, the investigation turned up something even more unsettling. Surveillance footage from a street camera revealed a shadowy figure leaving the house just minutes before the police were called. The figure moved with a precision that suggested familiarity with the home. It wasn't a random break-in. It was someone who knew Daniel, and perhaps knew him too well. As the town absorbed the shock, rumors spread. Some claimed they had seen strangers at night, vans parked along the outskirts, odd figures slipping into alleyways. Others insisted it was an inside job, a jealous friend, a hidden feud, a secret no one should have unearthed. The tension was palpable. Ashwood, the town that prided itself on knowing everyone's business, suddenly became a maze of suspicion. Marissa dug deeper, interviewing Daniel's friends and family. Everyone described him as cautious, even paranoid at times. He had been investigating something locally, a series of disappearances that hadn't made the national news, strange events that the police had dismissed as coincidences. Daniel believed they weren't coincidences at all. He had been mapping connections, scribbling notes, and speaking in hushed tones to anyone who would listen. But who would listen when everyone is too afraid to see what's really happening in their own backyard? By the third day, the detectives discovered a hidden camera inside Daniel's bedroom, obscured behind a smoke detector. It had captured footage of people entering the house when Daniel wasn't home. Faces blurred by distance, but the movements were deliberate, almost surgical. Marissa realized the danger wasn't over. Whoever did this was still watching. And Ashwood's serene streets, lined with friendly houses, were no longer safe. But the real shock came when they checked Daniel's laptop. A series of encrypted files hinted at a network, a small but sophisticated operation happening right under the town's nose. And then Marissa noticed something she couldn't ignore, a name that kept appearing, someone the town trusted, someone with influence, someone no one would ever suspect. Marissa and Lucas exchanged a glance that needed no words. Whoever this was, the game had only just begun. And the stakes were higher than they had imagined. That night, Marissa returned to the crime scene alone, under the cover of darkness. Streetlights flickered as she retraced Daniel's last steps. The air was thick with the scent of wet leaves and decay. Then, at the edge of the backyard, she noticed it, a door, half buried under fallen branches. She brushed the debris aside, revealing a rusted metal lock. Her heart pounded in her chest. She knew what was behind it would change everything. But when she finally opened the door, the darkness inside swallowed her flashlight's beam. And in that instant, Marissa realized Ashwood had been hiding more than just a killer. Secrets in the shadows. Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and comment if you're brave enough to follow this story, because the darkness hiding in Ashwood is far from over. Marissa's hands shook as she held the flashlight over the gaping basement doorway. The metal stairs groaned beneath her weight, protesting as she descended into the unknown. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to call backup, but the detective in her, the one who had chased killers through alleys in Chicago and interrogated gang leaders in Los Angeles, pushed her forward. She had to know. The basement was musty, cold, the kind of oppressive damp that seeps into your bones. Her flashlight beam cut through the shadows, revealing a scene that made her stomach twist. Files, boxes, and shredded papers littered the concrete floor. But it wasn't just the mess, it was the patterns. Every item seemed deliberately placed, almost ritualistic. Daniel had discovered something here, something someone didn't want him to find, and whoever had left this mess wanted him to pay the ultimate price. Marissa noticed a faint trail of blood, not fresh but not completely dried either. It led to a corner where a small desk had been overturned. Scrawled across a wall in what looked like pencil marks were names, dates, and locations, all connected with lines, an intricate map of disappearances, events, and odd transactions. Whoever created this chart had a detailed knowledge of Ashwood, the townspeople, and their secrets. Detective Lucas Rivera arrived just as Marissa snapped a photo of the wall. "Marissa," he whispered, eyes scanning the basement with a mix of fear and fascination, "this is bigger than I thought." Daniel didn't just stumble onto something. He was digging into a network. A network of people covering things up, maybe even orchestrating them. Marissa nodded grimly. "And it's still active. Whoever killed him is probably closer than we think." The detectives worked silently for hours, cataloging evidence, photographing every detail, and trying to make sense of the tangled web Daniel had uncovered. Every name and date raised more questions than answers. Why were these disappearances never reported? How had someone manipulated the town into ignoring them? And most importantly, who had the power and influence to keep such darkness hidden for years? By the next morning, word had spread through Ashwood. Residents whispered about Daniel's murder and the basement discovery, but no one came forward. Everyone claimed ignorance, but Marissa knew better. Fear had gripped this town, and fear was a dangerous ally to killers. Then came the first break, but it didn't feel like one. The town's local newspaper, the Ashwood Gazette, published a story about Daniel's death. But the article was sanitized, stripped of the basement details, mentioning only a tragic accident and a vague investigation ongoing. The reporter, a young man named Simon Hale, had been one of Daniel's friends, and when questioned by Marissa, he hesitated. "I just don't want to get anyone in trouble," he muttered, eyes darting nervously. Some people are dangerous here." Marissa felt the weight of his words. She had read the signs before. In small towns, people protect each other, not always out of loyalty, but out of fear. And whoever Daniel had been tracking, they had influence, reach, and a readiness to strike fear into anyone who threatened to expose them. Days turned into a tense week. Marissa and Lucas followed leads. Abandoned warehouses on the outskirts, suspicious bank transactions, phone records pointing to unregistered numbers. And all the while, someone was watching. Surveillance cameras caught glimpses of a van parked near Daniel's apartment. Shadows moved along the streets late at night. The detectives felt it in their bones. The killer wasn't done. Then came a call that made Marissa's blood run cold. It was from Daniel's sister, Emily. "Detective, you have to come quick," she cried, her voice trembling. "My house, someone's been here. They took everything. My laptop, my journal, the files Daniel left me. I think they're coming after me next." Marissa grabbed her coat and rushed over, Lucas at her side. Emily's home was ransacked, drawers emptied, papers scattered, computers missing. Whoever had done this was careful, efficient, and clearly knew the family's movements. And like Daniel, Emily had been silent witnesses to something terrifying. That night, the detectives stayed with Emily. They set up cameras, monitored calls, and kept watch. But Ashwood had eyes everywhere, or so it seemed. Every shadow seemed alive, every movement suspicious. And then, just past midnight, they caught a glimpse, a figure slipping silently past the window, disappearing into the darkness. The soundless intrusion confirmed their worst fears. The killer was still among them, bold enough to toy with the investigators themselves. The following days revealed more chilling connections. Daniel's notebook contained mentions of local officials, business owners, even members of the fire department. Each person, in theory, was respected, ordinary, unremarkable. But Marissa realized that small-town respectability often masks corruption, greed, and cruelty. Every lead, every interview, added to a growing suspicion. Ashwood's serene streets hid a network of complicity. Marissa and Lucas discovered something that changed the investigation entirely: a pattern in the disappearances. Every victim had some link to a single, influential family, the Hawthorns. The Hawthorns had lived in Ashwood for generations, owning businesses, wielding influence, and maintaining a near-mythical reputation. But buried beneath the polite smiles and charity donations were shadows, accidents, disappearances, rumors of threats, all quietly dismissed by a fearful populace. Determined to confront the truth, Marissa visited the Hawthorne estate alone, posing as a concerned citizen. The house loomed large, its Gothic architecture more intimidating in the gray morning light. She rang the bell, heart hammering, palms sweating. When the door opened, she was greeted by a man in his 50s, clean-cut, polite, but with eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. "I'm Detective Holden," she said calmly, flashing her badge. "I need to ask you a few questions about Daniel Carter." The man smiled, smooth, controlled, almost rehearsed. "Detective, such a tragedy. Daniel was a good boy. But you must understand, rumors, accusations, they spread easily in small towns." Something in his tone, the measured cadence, set off alarms in Marissa's mind. She noted everything: the way he avoided eye contact when she mentioned the disappearances, the subtle tightening of his jaw when she referred to the Hawthorne family connections. This wasn't just a polite avoidance. It was calculated deflection. That night, Marissa returned to the precinct, piecing together evidence. Every clue, every interview, every shadowed corner pointed back to the Hawthorns. The family had influence, money, and connections. They could manipulate the town, silence journalists, and intimidate witnesses. But now, Marissa realized something terrifying. The closer she got to exposing the Hawthorns, the closer she was to becoming a target herself. Then, the break Marissa had feared came. Emily Hawthorne, the youngest member of the family, had disappeared. No note, no witnesses, nothing. Just like Daniel. Marissa and Lucas realized the killer was escalating, sending a warning: dig deeper, and more lives would be at risk. By the time Chapter 2 closed, Ashwood was no longer a quiet town. It was a trap. Every friendly face could hide menace. Every shadow could conceal danger. And Marissa knew that the next steps would demand courage, cunning, and the willingness to confront the darkest corners of a seemingly ordinary town. As she stared out at the dimly lit streets that night, she whispered to herself, "Ashwood isn't just hiding a killer, it's hiding a legacy of fear. And we're running out of time." But even as she spoke, a movement in the alley across the street caught her eye. A figure, watching, waiting, patient. Someone who had planned for every move, every decision, every investigation. Someone who would not stop until Ashwood's secrets remained buried forever. And in that moment, Marissa realized the true terror. The streets weren't silent. They were listening. The shadows strike back. Before you get lost in this final chapter, remember to smash that subscribe button, hit like, and comment below if you think you could survive a town like Ashwood, because what happens next will shake you to your core. The night was thick with fog, the kind that seemed to swallow streetlights and twist shadows into monstrous shapes. Marissa and Lucas sat in the unmarked car at the edge of Hawthorne Estates, their eyes scanning the property. Inside, a gala was taking place, or at least, that's what the exterior suggested. In reality, the Hawthornes were hiding something far darker, the culmination of years of manipulation, fear, and murder. Detective Holden's phone buzzed, a text from an anonymous source. Check the south wing. Now. It was Daniel's voice, or rather, the evidence he had left behind leading her here. Marissa's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, but she had no choice. If the Hawthornes had Emily, time was running out. They approached the south wing cautiously, each step muffled by fog and wet leaves. Lucas held the flashlight, casting long, swinging beams across the stone pathway. The air smelled of damp earth and decay, and a strange tension wrapped around them, like the estate itself was holding its breath. As they entered, the ornate interior of the mansion gave way to something entirely different. The walls of the corridor were lined with locked doors, each numbered and heavily reinforced. Dust covered the floors, but scuff marks suggested recent activity. The hum of electricity echoed faintly from behind the walls. Someone, or something, was active here. Marissa tried the first door. But Lucas tried the second. But by the third door, they heard muffled sounds, a voice, faint and trembling. Marissa signaled Lucas to stay back, then pressed her ear to the door. "Emily," she whispered. A soft cry came from inside. "Yes, help me." Without hesitation, Marissa kicked the door open. Inside, a small, dimly lit room revealed Emily Hawthorne, tied to a chair, a gag in her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her hands shook violently. The faint smell of fear and sweat hung in the air. The detectives rushed forward, cutting the ropes, and Marissa held Emily tightly. "You're safe now," she whispered, but deep down she knew the danger was far from over. A sudden creak echoed behind them. The shadows in the corner shifted, and then he stepped forward, the head of the Hawthorne family, William Hawthorne. Tall, imposing, with eyes colder than steel. His smile was slow, calculated, and utterly terrifying. "Detective Holden," he said, his voice smooth but dripping with menace, "I've been expecting you." Marissa squared her shoulders. "William Hawthorne. It ends tonight. We know what you've done. All the disappearances, the threats, the murders, you're finished." He laughed softly, a sound that made the walls of the room vibrate with malice. "You misunderstand me, detective. I am not finished. I am protected. Ashwood protects me. Every move you make, every investigation, is simply part of a game I am winning." Lucas tightened his grip on his service weapon. Emily's life isn't part of any game. William's gaze shifted toward Emily, who shrank back. "Oh, but it is, detective. It always is. Every person who uncovers the truth becomes a player in my little experiment." Daniel Carter was a curious one. Too curious. Emily, unfortunately, inherited that same curiosity. The room seemed to close in on them. Marissa's mind raced. She needed a strategy, any strategy. She studied William's movements, the slight twitch in his right hand, the way his eyes flicked toward the doorway as if expecting reinforcements. Then she remembered Daniel's notes, the patterns of the disappearances. The Hawthornes didn't just act alone. They had enablers, hidden allies who did their bidding. Marissa whispered to Lucas, "We need a distraction. On my mark." She raised her voice, calling out, "You're finished, William. The town sees you now." He froze, startled, and in that split second, Lucas hurled a heavy metal chair across the room. William dodged, but the sudden chaos gave Marissa the chance to tackle him to the floor. They struggled violently, fists and determination clashing. Emily screamed, which only intensified the tension, making the mansion walls echo with fear. Finally, with a combination of brute force and precise moves honed over years of investigation, Lucas and Marissa subdued William, cuffing him before he could call for backup. But the relief was short-lived. A sudden alarm blared. Hidden cameras throughout the mansion had triggered a silent alert. The Hawthorne's enforcers were on their way. Marissa grabbed Emily. "We move now." They sprinted through the corridors, dodging traps, pushing open doors, and narrowly avoiding hidden security measures. The mansion seemed alive, designed to ensnare intruders. And yet, the detectives pressed forward, each step a race against time. Outside, the fog thickened. The estate's perimeter was guarded, but Marissa and Lucas had anticipated this. Emily, guided between them, clung to Marissa as they slipped through a maintenance exit that Daniel had mapped in his notes. Behind them, the mansion erupted with noise, yells, shouting, and the unmistakable sound of pursuit. They reached their vehicle, breathless, hearts hammering. As Lucas started the engine, Marissa glanced back. The silhouette of William Hawthorne appeared at the top of the mansion stairs, arms raised, as if he could command the fog itself to stop them. His face twisted in fury, rage, and the satisfaction of someone who had long believed themselves untouchable. But for once, he was wrong. Police cars converged on. The estate, responding to an anonymous tip Marissa had left moments before entering. Within minutes, William and his key enforcers were in custody. Ashwood's shadows began to unravel. The disappearances, the threats, the network of fear, they were finally being exposed. In the aftermath, the town of Ashwood faced a reckoning. Families who had ignored warning signs, neighbors who had turned a blind eye, and officials who had allowed fear to dictate action were all forced to confront the reality that evil had lived among them for decades. The Hawthorne legacy, carefully cultivated, crumbled in public view. Emily Hawthorne, traumatized but alive, became a key witness. Her testimony revealed how her family had manipulated the town, silenced victims, and maintained control through fear, bribery, and intimidation. Daniel Carter's work, once thought lost, became the roadmap for bringing justice to the dozens of families who had suffered in silence. Marissa and Lucas, exhausted but resolute, documented every detail, knowing the story would shock the nation once publicized. And yet, even as the town celebrated the end of one chapter, Marissa couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that darkness always finds a way to hide. 3 months later, while reviewing newly discovered files from the Hawthorne estate, Marissa noticed a pattern she hadn't seen before. One name kept appearing, a man who had always been on the periphery of the investigation, seemingly harmless, a community volunteer who had attended every town meeting and charity event. The files indicated he had been coordinating with the Hawthornes for years, keeping tabs on victims and manipulating evidence. Before she could alert Lucas, a package arrived at the precinct. Inside, a single flash drive labeled, "For Marissa, there's more." The screen lit up with footage showing a house in Ashwood, eerily familiar, and a figure standing at the window. The handwriting on the side of the video read, "You thought it was over." Marissa sat back, heart pounding. The town had exhaled, believing the nightmare was over, but the shadows had only shifted. Whoever had survived the Hawthorne downfall was still watching, still plotting, and still within Ashwood streets. The final realization settled in. The silence of Ashwood streets had been broken, but not all the darkness had been exposed. Evil, as Marissa now knew, isn't always loud. It waits, quiet and patient, until the moment it can strike again. And in Ashwood, it was waiting. Detective Holden turned to Lucas. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "It's only the beginning. And the streets, they're still listening." Outside, the fog rolled across the town like a living thing, swallowing streetlights and houses alike. Somewhere, a shadow moved between the trees. The viewer could feel it. Ashwood, this quiet little town, would never be the same again. And as the screen fades to black, the echo of a single, chilling thought remains. They thought the killer was behind bars, but the game is far from over.